Whether you operate one forklift or thousands, one location or hundreds, the new My Toyota customer portal can help you optimize your operation and material handling equipment. This one-stop, free-to-use platform is designed to help you take control of your information and make smarter decisions, all at the touch of a button. Register and access your data today at my.toyotaforklift.com. That's my.toyotaforklift.com.
The New Warehouse Podcast, hosted by Kevin Lawton, is your source for insights and ideas from the distribution, transportation, and logistics industry. A new episode every Monday morning brings you the latest from industry experts and thought leaders. And now, here's Kevin.
Hi guys, this is Kevin Lawton with the New Warehouse Podcast, back with a new episode. This week we have Joern Tinnemeyer, who is the CTO at Enersys. Enersys is a company that manufactures batteries for multiple industries, but specifically motive power as well, which plays into our industry in terms of forklifts and things of that nature. You guys may remember that I spoke with Harold at ProMat in one of the ProMat episodes, and we actually talked about this concept of wireless charging for forklifts, which was actually one of my favorite things that I found out about and learned about at ProMat. So we talked further with Harold, and he put me in touch with Joern. So we're going to talk to Joern today more about wireless charging, what that really means, how that works, and kind of how that concept is developing. So Joern, thanks so much for joining us on the show today. How are you?
Hi, Kevin. I'm great. Thank you for having me here.
Definitely happy to have you. I'm really, really excited to hear more about this. So why don't you give us a little bit of a general overview, I guess, of Enersys, and then how Enersys is getting involved in this wireless charging concept.
Yeah, sure. So Enersys is a world leader in industrial battery systems, and you probably, or your listeners probably know of us from the work that we've done in developing lead-acid batteries for the forklift industry, and that's part of our business. The other part of our business, of course, is also reserve power, so telecom sites, UPS sites for data centers and energy storage system, and we also have some defense work. And so I think in the U.S. we deliver approximately 60% of lift truck batteries, and I think we've got about 52% of worldwide lift truck batteries. So we like the lift truck business. We see that there's changes occurring into this business, and you know, we want to make sure that we provide our customers with the best possible experience, and so this has moved on from flooded systems and moving towards maintenance-free technologies, and wireless is part of that experience.
Okay, so why don't you tell us a little bit about, you know, how wireless charging will work? Because when Harold told me about this, I was pretty blown away by it myself. And I heard that you are the expert to go to on this.
Well, I lead the team of many experts in this particular field, so I'm only the front man to this band. So, but yeah, like I've only been at Enersys for 3 years, so I came personally outside of the automotive business. And when I first came here, I was kind of shocked about the size of the cords that these batteries had. You know, being an automotive business, you charge cars up, and it's no problem. And then you know you start hearing statistics like, wow, one of the main reasons people have issues with their chargers is they rip them off the wall, and so you start hearing this, and you start understanding also about, well, people are not charging their batteries, and you think, well, why are they not charging their batteries? And when you go up to it, And being new to this field, you start to see, wow, these are really large cables, and especially if you're charging at 640 amps, you've got two pairs of these that you're putting through.
Yeah.
And so you start to understand the problem, and you start to, when you go to one of these facilities, you also start to understand why cables could get wrapped around. I mean, I just don't blame them. I don't blame people for perhaps not charging as often as they do, and I don't blame people from ripping, chargers off walls either. We've got to, as an industry, need to improve that. And to me, wireless charging was one easy way to do it. And when I talked a little bit about flooded batteries moving to maintenance-free. Well, that's really the ultimate maintenance-free experience, right? Is you use your lift truck, you park it somewhere, and you walk away, and you keep on using it, and you don't even have to worry about the concept of charging anymore. That's really the ultimate of where you want to go to, and that's the experience that we want to create here at Enersys, and that's wireless starts to become a critical part of that.
Definitely, yeah. I think the concept is amazing. I love it, and I can speak to the issues that you're talking about as operations manager as well. I mean, people all the time, they forget to plug in the machine, end of the day. And like you said, the plug itself, for some people, it can be daunting. I mean, I've worked with, smaller individuals that, they have trouble even just pulling the plug out of the battery after charging. So it's definitely going to be a huge, huge difference. So why don't you tell us a little bit about, how the wireless charging actually works, and what does something like that look like?
Sure, and I think, most people are aware of it from the fact of using it, say, for their toothbrush, right? And also today, a lot of the cell phones and so forth are using wireless charging. So we see that, and it's starting to become a little bit commonplace around us. And then you start to think about, well, there's a huge difference, though, between, say, a toothbrush and a forklift, right, in terms of battery size and how much power do you have.
Yeah, a little bit.
But in principle, it's exactly the same. So in principle, how the system and the technology behind your toothbrush and how the wireless charger on say that a forklift system, here you've got maybe a few milliwatts on your toothbrush, and now we were dealing with 10 kilowatts up to 40 kilowatts of power transfer. The physics is exactly the same, and it all starts out with what Tesla started to develop back in 1893. Right, and he started developing these concepts, and he had this crazy tower that was set up back in 1904, the Tesla Tower that famously caught fire. But this is, the principles behind this haven't changed, and it's very similar to say how a transformer works. It's just two coils, and you've got what's called a primary coil, and you put a current through it that creates a magnetic field. And then you've got a secondary coil that picks up that magnetic field, and then it creates a current in it, and that's how the power then is transferred. And that's the wireless transfer that occurs between the two. And that's like I said, it's exactly like how your toothbrush works, and that's exactly how our wireless charger in principle works for charging up lift truck systems.
Interesting. So what does it look like? Is it like a pad that you would place on the floor, or is it like in the floor itself?
Yeah, so there's multiple ways that you can do it. You can put a pad in the floor, and so that becomes then that primary. That's that first piece of wire, and it's a wire coil that gets excited. There's also a bunch of other technologies we can discuss a little bit later on of what's more in there. So you can put them in, and it's not that expensive to also put them into the floor. The other option that we have for customers that we're developing is a mat. So you can put multiple coils into a mat, and you can lay that mat down. I don't know, you may want to put that by a break room, lunch room, right? And just certain areas where the vehicle, typically where you would park it. And the idea is that you park the vehicle on the mat, or you park the vehicle on a designated area on the floor, and as long as you're within that painted designated area, you're going to be charging.
Got it. Okay. So it is actually, so there's different ways to implement it. Sounds like you can have it kind of built into the floor, or it has this mat, almost like you mentioned, the wireless charging pads for cell phones, right?
Absolutely, and you can advance this even further in concepts that we're also working on called dynamic charging. And so what that is, you'll have certain alleyways, say that a lot of the forklift of what a lot of the trucks are driving down, and then so you can have multiple coils in this alleyway, and so as you're driving over, it just at every point it just pulses more energy into the battery. So, and that's really creating that completely carefree experience then. And so that's something that you can consider doing, say, in a greenfield facility.
Definitely, yeah. That's one of the things that Harold was telling me about, and that was like totally just blew my mind because it makes so much sense, and it's such a great improvement because, you know, if you look at your warehouse and, you know, you have your fastest moving items that you're picking and you make that alleyway that you're talking about, you know, you're kind of doing so much more efficiently, I think, and controlling your power so much more. So how would, you know, how does the machine, I guess, communicate to the charger as it's passing over it or as it comes in contact with it and knows that it does need to charge?
We'll be back after a quick break.
You hear a lot about supply chains these days, because if the past couple years have taught us anything, it's that an efficient, well-managed supply chain is absolutely critical to keeping businesses successful and consumers happy. I'm Will Haywood, and I host a podcast called All Business, No Boundaries, where we talk about supply chains, how they work, what happens when they don't, and the innovations that are redefining what's possible in the world of logistics. Join me for insightful interviews with thought leaders and industry experts. We discuss how optimizing supply chains can break down the barriers that are holding businesses back. That's All Business, No Boundaries by DHL Supply Chain. Listen and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts.
Sure, yeah, it's a really good question because you don't want the coil just kind of sitting there transmitting power, right? Like, but that would be bad. So, I mean, especially when we're talking about power levels like 10 plus kilowatts. So you want to make sure that the coil is in reasonable close proximity. So we actually have a radio transmitter. So there's a transceiver, so both transmits and receive, and that's on the lift truck right by its receiving coil. And there's another one that sits on the primary coil. And what that system does, when you come close to it, you're getting that reception, and they start communicating with one another. And as you get even closer, it starts to put in a little bit of power into the coils, and you start to see some coupling. And so the coupling is just saying how much power am I receiving in that other coil. I'm just putting in a little bit just out of security reasons and because I don't want to irradiate anyone that's close by. And so once it sees that coupling strength is extremely high, and also it starts to understand that there is no metal pieces that are in between or other, you know, say a person or a hand or something in between the coils, it then puts full power into the system. So it's a transmitter that first goes on, then some little bit of magnetic field. Once the magnetic field is optimized, it puts in full power, and then if it feels that the truck is moving away again, it just drops the power off right away.
Interesting. So the transmitter is really, it senses the transmitter, and that's kind of what kicks it on. Yeah,
it's kind of like a Bluetooth, right? It's almost like a Bluetooth communication that occurs prior to even the magnetic field going on.
Very interesting. So now, what about in terms of the speed of charging? Now, is it equivalent to, you know, a standard charger that we would use today? Is it faster, slower? How does that stand?
It's about exactly the same. So it really depends upon the power requirement of your charger. So, for instance, if you've got a 10 kW charger sitting there, we can replace it with a 10 kW wireless charger. So, and the real cool thing about this as well is that, you know, we're hearing a lot, of course, about lithium being now used in the space, and we're also producing lithium batteries. So it's actually agnostic to that chemistry. So then if you had that charger coil that sits there, you can drive both over a lead acid battery or a lithium battery. They would communicate with one another. The power levels would be close to the same. And right now, as I mentioned, I think the highest level chargers you can get right now that are more commonplace are about 35 kilowatts, and we're going right up to 40 kilowatts with that charging. So the customer would be in no way have less of a power experience with this. They can have as much power as they wish. and it's almost one charger fits all, right? So if you've got, a mixed population of trucks, you don't have to worry anymore. Oh, well, I need to go to the lithium charger. Well, no, I need to go with this truck over to the lead acid charger. Here, you don't worry about it.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I love that actually because, you go through, in operations, you go through points where, say you switch your whole fleet to lithium ion, but then you go through a peak season and now all of a sudden you got to get some rental trucks, but they don't have lithium ion. So that's really, really great. I love that. Now, what does it look like? You mentioned a little bit about, it can be built into the floor, it can be a pad, but what does it look like from an implementation perspective? Is it like when you say it can be a pad on the floor, is it as simple as like I'm just bringing this pad and putting it down, or like what does an implementation look like for this?
Sure. You'll have a box on the wall, very similar in size to probably what your charger box is today. And so that takes the power in from the mains, and what that does is actually up the voltage on it and change the frequency of it. And so you'll have a cable that then goes from that box, and that box will that cable will then go either underground to the coil or will then go to the pad. And then that pad, would have a thickness of maybe 1 or 2 inches. It would have, it's very industrialized rubber, so you can drive over it. It's designed for being driven over, but with forklifts. There'll be a slight ramping to it or an incline to it, so you can easily, comfortably drive onto it. And if it's on the ground, you won't even see it. Like it's just completely covered, and we just would, as I mentioned, just have a designated painted area that when you're in this painted area, you'll charge. And so it's really just that box that sits then on the wall. And you can also have one pad, can also have multiple trucks sitting on it. So you have power sharing, which is another interesting feature because, you only have so much power going from inside your distribution center. You may only have so many line power coming in, say, for instance, per circuit, and we don't want to overburden that circuit either. And so our system is actually smart enough to communicate with the other trucks, if it's using an Enersys system, and say, okay, well, truck number 2 that's parked over there, it's got the lowest state of charge. I'm going to put a lot more power into that truck. And the other guy that has a much higher state of charge, I'm going to reduce the amount of power. So I can load level what's going on in a very smart way.
Interesting. That's really, really smart. So the pad itself, I guess you can get pads in multiple sizes, or how does that work?
Yeah, exactly. So what we're thinking of is say something that's 4 feet by 10 feet, or something that's relatively small that can fit maybe just one lift truck or multiple lift trucks on it. So these things are still in the design stages. This isn't ready yet for prime time, but we also have our demonstration systems that we have working right now at some customer facilities, so it's not that far off either. So, but we're still trying to see and ascertain to see what type of size is optimum for the customer.
Got it. And how is I guess you're doing these trials at the customer, so how has that been going, and what has the customer reaction been to it?
Right now they love it. So this one has been, it's for AGV usages, which is also interesting because typically you have a shoe, which is a mechanical connection. So this first trial customer is replacing that mechanical connection with a wireless system, and they haven't had any issues with it because there's no mechanical contact anymore, right? So, which is another benefit of the system. You have no mechanical wear and tear, right? Even from a connection from a regular standpoint, from a regular forklift, there's only so many connection cycles. You get wear and tear on the cord and so forth. You don't have to worry about that anymore. So right now the field trials have just started. Knock on wood, they're going well.
That's good to hear. I mean, I can't imagine that an operation would not love this. I mean, I'm like, I want to buy a warehouse myself just to put this inside of it. It's like, I think it's like so cool. So you mentioned earlier about it's with the transmitter, how it's sensing if there's no metal objects in the way or people or anything like that. So from a safety perspective, what's really put in place with the system to make sure that nothing goes wrong?
Sure. I mean, the first thing is that we're people are worried, of course, about wireless power transfer. People get worried about putting their cell phone in their pocket. And here we're only talking about maybe 5 watts, and so here we're looking at 10 kilowatts, right? And so multitudes of orders of magnitude higher. So everyone is concerned, and it's one of the demonstrations I kind of even do to people is when they're here at our facility, and clearly we have these working systems there. When we turn it on, I put my hand right underneath it, and nothing happens. If you don't have any real metal objects on your hands, there's nothing that will happen. Now, if you do have a metal object, then what will happen is that just as in the coil, you'll start getting what are called eddy currents. So you say, for instance, if you have a ring on your finger, on your hand, that ring will heat up relatively quickly, right? Because in essence, you've got an inductive cooker. And so we have to make sure that we stop this. The other thing that we want to make sure of is that there's nothing other pieces in between there. So we want to make sure that there's no metal in between. We want to make sure, that some person doesn't get the smart idea and say, hey, let's cook a pizza in between there. I'll stick a pizza between my two coils and heat them up. And so this is kind of called, and we call this foreign object detection. And so we have actually infrared cameras that pick this up, and we also are very clear, because I already mentioned that Bluetooth communication. So we can transmit, the primary can transmit how much power it's sending, and if the receiver isn't getting all that power, then clearly something's in between that's taking the power. And so there's multiple safety mechanisms that we have in place that make sure that there's no metal there, or pizza, or hand, or any other object.
Okay. So now what about just thinking that, as you're driving forklifts, if you're carrying a load, does that ever interfere at all, or no, because it's kind of above the truck itself?
No, it's a really good question. It's you have what's called leakage that can occur on the side. That leakage, it's so with electric theory, it's a 1/r². Well, so what that means is that if I stay away 2 feet, then I have a reduction of 1/4, right, and so on and so forth. 3 feet, one reduction of 1/9. Okay. And so it means that my field is going away relatively quickly as I move away from the system. In fact, the magnetic field of the Earth is much stronger than that of our charger when it's full on if you're just 2 feet away from it. But you still want to reduce that leakage as much as possible. I mentioned that thing about the ring finger getting, or your ring getting hot if you have it on your hand. Well, the other thing is clearly the whole forklift is made out of metal. So what you don't want is some of that energy, some of that magnetic field energy getting into the forklift and heating up the forklift a little bit, right? And it's not going to create a problem, but what it does do is reduce efficiency. So there's a lot of modeling and a lot of engineering that goes into place to block out and to form the magnetic fields to make sure it gets concentrated directly into that secondary coil, and it doesn't go into the truck, or it doesn't go into the payload that the truck might be carrying.
Interesting. Okay. Yeah, it sounds like it's really smart. I mean, the system definitely, and it's really thinking. So so are there anything else that we should know about wireless charging? And do you have any kind of timeline, I guess, until this can be more like widespread and people can start to put this solution into their operations?
So what we did at ProMat is in essence gave our first little look into the market to see how does the market receive something like this, right? Yeah. Because it is so different from what people are used to. And we were really pleasantly surprised. Like everyone kind of said, you've got the lithium batteries, but where's your wireless charger? Yeah. So it was really amazing, actually, the type of attention that system received. In terms of timing, well, we do things in what's called ABC samples. That's directly from an automotive system, and so we've gone past the initial trial point, and so now we're going into the overall manufacturer design system and bringing cost downs and so forth. So it's still a work in progress. It's not going to come out this year, but we're hoping to, at some point to the end of next year, that we'll have units that are available.
That's awesome. Is there a waiting list for customers? Or?
There really is. So many people want to try this thing. I mean, even the one example of the one customer that I gave, this customer was begging and pleading for this technology, and we said, well, it's really early, but we put it in, and like I said, right now the results are really, really good. One of the things that I would say is that what we're trying to differentiate ourselves with as well is the fact that you don't want to remove one inconvenience and replace it with another inconvenience. Definitely. And so by that I mean, in a lot of these cases, and we're taking this also from the automotive and bus world that have been using wireless charging, is that the placement and how precisely you are over these coils starts to become really important. So if the guy is sitting there with his lift truck and he's got to jiggle the thing around for 30, 40 seconds until he's directly on and fully aligned, you're just removing one inconvenience but replacing it with another in that case, right? Yeah. And so that's why we're concentrating on putting a lot of effort in to try to make that as effortless and as seamless as possible, and that's where that whole intention is. You just drive it into a marked area and off you go, and I think that's where we're going to have a very strong competitive advantage, our ability to do this.
Yeah, I think that would be great, because like you said, if you have to move around and kind of find that sweet spot, I guess, then you're kind of still using the same time that you would take to plug it in. So
exactly.
So it's really awesome that you guys are trying to cut that out. I mean, that's like a true continuous improvement effort, and huge. I mean, I think it's a game changer. So I'm not surprised that you have people begging you to get it into their facilities. So obviously, wireless charging definitely. I think that's something that's going to be, in the distribution center of the future. At some point, I think that's going to be just the norm. I can't imagine that it wouldn't be. But from your standpoint and from like a motive power standpoint, what do you think the distribution center of the future looks like?
Well, I think wireless charging will be part of this. Fast charging might be another area that we'll see. If anything, when I came into this, the picture that I had is that, as I started out with the degree of cabling that you have to do with the how difficult it is and how people forget about this, it's just the lift trucks and the power systems for the lift trucks that we want to create is more than just a maintenance-free experience. It needs to be a completely reliable experience, an experience where they say, I don't know how this thing is powered, it just always works. I just use the thing and it always works. I don't have to charge it, I don't have to do anything with it, because they don't know. Like, this is all happening in the background. Because, we know this. There's, these people are there to move products from point A to point B. They shouldn't have to worry about the device that's carrying that. The only thing that they should worry about is the fact that it's 100% reliable. And that's where we want to move towards. And we want to move away from the fact that they have to be battery experts and they have to water things and all of this. I think this is just going to be something of the past. The distribution center of the future will be that you can put a worker on any type of lift truck and you'll never have to worry about fueling or charging or anything else like this.
Definitely. I think you make a great point there, especially, you think in a distribution center, like you said, you want to put that person on the machine and you want them to move what they have to move, and you don't want them to have to think about anything else in between to get the most efficient flow. So definitely, I think, like I said, wireless charging, huge. I think it's a game changer, and I think it'll definitely be a part of the distribution center of the future. And it sounds like maybe in a year's time, it will be. So definitely excited to see more of that. Is there anything else that listeners should know about wireless charging, or maybe what Enersys has in store for the future?
Well, we're packaging this so if you look at our lithium system that we have, for instance, it's based on a modular concept. So what we have here is that one of the concepts that we're working on is that you just pull out one of those lithium modules and you can put in a wireless module. So you can immediately change your asset over to wireless. The other thing is, as I already mentioned, for our thin plate pure lead technology that we have, it has excellent energy throughput, particularly if you do a lot of opportune charging. And that's the other aspect that wireless starts to bring in is that you will charge more and more often, which then means that these other types of chemistry technologies, you may not need, say, for instance, lithium at your facility. You could stay with a thin plate pure lead technology, for instance. And as I already mentioned, it's completely agnostic to that chemistry. It doesn't care what's attached to it. So I think in the end, what we're trying to do is give the customer as much choice as possible and move really towards that customer experience option where they can have, okay, if I can afford this much, then this is the option that you can take. But, or if you can afford, a little bit more, you may want to have more capacity and you may want to have less of these coils. In all of these cases, we'll have a solution for you.
Okay, great to know. Yeah, I mean, I think that, moving towards these things, it's all going to help improve the efficiency and output of distribution centers, especially as, service levels increase and distribution centers are pumping out more volume and working more hours in the day, sometimes every hour of the day. All these little things can help definitely to improve and get everybody into that service level that's now expected by the consumer. So, Joern, thank you so much for joining us on the New Warehouse podcast. How can people find out more information about this?
Just go to www.enersys.com, and we're happy to help you. So thank you for having me.
Definitely. Love to have you. And wireless charging, I think, a huge game changer. Can't wait to see what else you guys do. This has been the New Warehouse podcast. Check us out at thenewwarehouse.com.
You've been listening to the New Warehouse Podcast with Kevin Lawton. Subscribe and check us out online at thenewwarehouse.com.
Thank you for listening to this episode. If you want more content from the New Warehouse, check out our new video series called All Hands on LinkedIn. Just search for the New Warehouse on LinkedIn and follow along.